In the 1960s and 70s, the movement of humanist photography in Lithuania became famous across the Soviet Union and known abroad as the Lithuanian School of Photography. This term was first used in Moscow in 1969 in a discussion of the exhibition 9 Lithuanian Photographers, which was meant to promote the newly formed Lithuanian Society of Photography in the capital of the Soviet Union. Russian scholars saw a certain similarity in the works of those photographers who composed the nucleus of the organization. Antanas Sutkus here, a few photographs by him. Algimantas Kunčius, I'm showing just the most famous ones. He is the most diverse of them. Antanas Miežanskas and Vitas Luckus, they were in that catalog. Marius Baranauskas and Liudvikas Ruikas. Romualdas Rakauskas, he's famous for his series Blossoming. Vitalijus Butyrinas. Aleksandras Macijauskas. And also I added here a slightly younger photographer who was not in that catalog, Romualdas Požerskis. And so, as I said, the Russian art historians noticed a similarity among them, and it was defined by the use of the following words: ethnographic contents, reportage method, psychology, work in series, and metaphorical artistic form. The main interest was in rural traditions conserving the spirit of Lithuania, but they also captured the energy of modernization. The photographers were committed to dynamic and expressive language. They used large prints, which were a technical requirement, as well as the contrast of figures and tones to convey clear messages, emphasized by poetic titles. Such Russian art historians as Lev Aninsky, Viktor Diomin, Mikhalkovich, Valery Stigneyev, Henri Vartanov wrote their theories of photography by using the Lithuanian school as a case study. The period is now remembered as a legendary rise of the new art form in Lithuania. The new generation of photographers who debuted in the 1980s spoiled this image and initiated a seismic shift in the field. They were called the rebels of the school. Alfonsas Budvytis, Vytautas Balčytis, Violeta Bubelytė, Alvydas Lukys, Remigijus Pačėjas, Algirdas Šeškus, Remigijus Treigys, Gintautas Trimakas, Gintaras Zinkevičius photographed bare walls and doorways, wardrobes and baths, dull urban spaces, people waiting for something to happen, often captives in their situations. Their photographs demonstrated quite clearly that the young generation did not observe the requirements imposed by Soviet ideology upon photography, to illustrate and promote Soviet reality, to idealize it and construct a Soviet model of history. The monotonous photographs of dull cityscapes and other mundane images suggested that those young photographers were openly antagonistic towards the image of a progressive society marching towards the communist future. However, it was also obvious that the undeclared purpose of the older generation to resist occupation and preserve national values did not interest these younger photographers either. From the traditional point of view, the new photography lacked meaning, ideas, and a sense of purpose. Opposition, however, took place not only in terms of politics and ideas, but also at the level of aesthetics. They blurred contrasts and replaced clarity sometimes with ambivalence. They also preferred small prints and sometimes tampered with quality by overdeveloping photographs, deliberately scratching them and exhibiting them in a disorderly manner. The meaning of these actions was illegible within the context of traditional aesthetics. The confused spectator had to admit that the images were of poor quality and simply boring. However, the photographer's choice of monotony, everydayness, and meaninglessness was conceptually linked to the tendency observed in late 20th century art to avoid meaning and to baffle viewers with patently empty works and indulge in boredom. Of course, that art was 20 years before this happened in Lithuania. It seems that artists related to various movements, minimalism, conceptualism, fluxus, pop art, followed the imperative of John Cage, published in 1949. I quote, "The responsibility of the artist consists in perfecting his work so that it may become attractively disinteresting," end of quote. One of the key figures in the art of the period, Andy Warhol, was obsessed with explorations of boredom and openly declared, "I like boring things." There were numerous exhibitions where nothing was exhibited and concerts where nothing was performed and nothing happened. This kind of art also reached the Soviet Union, where alternative artists began organizing empty actions and exposing the most banal aspects of Soviet life through their deliberately boring works. The focus on boredom was not accidental, for as Patricia Meyer-Sparks pointed out in her study of boredom in literature, boredom is a paradigm of the ordinary, which reveals a link between everyday life and the profound structures of culture and existence. When boredom is used as an aesthetic category, the spectator's experience has to be incorporated into the interpretation of images. The original uncertainty in front of a work of art, one which was intentionally uninteresting or boring. However, references to boredom do not mean that this kind of art is plainly boring. On the contrary, due to the tension created by the combination of monotony and indeterminacy, such images become particularly intriguing, at least to me. The concept of boredom is complex as it came out. Everyone is familiar with boredom. We experience it when waiting, when idle, when faced with repetition. If this were all there was to it, boredom, this great companion of the mundane, would not be a problem. However, there is another kind of boredom, the kind poets and philosophers associate with emptiness in life. It poisons the soul with a preconceived indifference to everything. No experience, feeling, or action has meaning in its presence. What is even worse, as Arthur Schopenhauer noted, this existential boredom is a positive proof that in itself existence has no value, end of quote. So there are two different kinds of boredom, situational and permanent. The confusion they cause can sometimes be unraveled by the thinkers and artists of all times. The most obvious reason for situational boredom is not knowing what to do. Economist Tibor Sitovsky believes that boredom signals people's need for some physical or mental activity to keep them occupied and vent their energy, just as hunger is a sign of the need for food, end of quote. Thus, boredom is related to spiritual hunger. People have long been escaping this spiritual hunger by filling up their time with entertainment. However, fun, travels, adrenaline, transgressions, and breaking taboos only increase the appetite, so more and stronger experiences are needed. The ever-helpful TV fills the time, but leaves it paradoxically empty and unlived. Work is simply more effective in masking boredom, which exists as a feeling that any activity is futile. Therefore, perhaps sometimes we should just enjoy doing nothing. And here the artist who indulge in boredom bears Zen philosophy in mind. For example, Chinese thinker Lao Tzu wrote, "Act without interfering, work without doing, taste the tasteless," end of quote. Art is often born of idleness, by removing oneself from mundane activities as though not doing anything important. Philosopher Walter Benjamin once wrote, "If sleep is the apogee of physical relaxation, boredom is the apogee of mental relaxation. Boredom is the dream bird that hatches the egg of experience," end of quote. Some of the deepest existential insights arrive while walking the same boring path every day or looking through the window all afternoon. Thus, boredom's message of spiritual hunger should be understood more radically, not as a need to fill time with actions, but as an opportunity for doubt and wonder. A prominent Lithuanian French semiotician, Algirdas Julius Greimas, wrote a book on imperfection in 1987, in which he tied the question of aesthetic experience to everyday perceptions. In the last pages of his book, Greimas refers to the Japanese garden where sand is raked every day afresh and stones are arranged always in a different order. From this example, he outlines the possibility of just such an aesthetics when he speaks of the impoverishment of life, to do everything in small segments, to learn to give value to experience details from almost nothing to create a hardly noticeable contingency, and nurture the anticipation of contingency. It is like following the dictum of John Cage, who suggested defeating boredom by fully giving into it. I quote, "In Zen, they say, if something is boring after 2 minutes, try it for 4. If still boring, try it for 8, 16, 32, and so on. Eventually, one discovers that it's not boring at all, but very interesting," end of quote. The boring everyday reality, its most banal expressions, emptiness, the slowing of time and boredom itself, all become subjects of art. Nothing happens in such works of art. Their structure is accidental, their message is a lack of meaning, silence, or a text entangled in contradictions. The aesthetics of boredom forms a rupture in that which is very close and very familiar. Such a work of art raises doubt in any stable meaning, whilst on the other hand introduces a trace of meaning into meaninglessness. Yet monotony should not disappear. The everyday almost nothing should remain as such. It should not become a significant something. This would be the main basic principle of the aesthetics of boredom, to enter an aesthetic experience through monotonous situations without forgetting the very fact of where, retaining it within consciousness and suspending meaning. The Lithuanian photographers focused on boredom marked by absurdity around them. While existential emptiness, it's printed on 2 sides, unusual for me, while Western societies suffered from an overload of information and change that created the impression that life was ephemeral and meaningless, Soviet society and its environment could be described as boring in the sense that it simply lacked variety. It was uniform and nothing changed through the decades. In other words, it was literally boring. The American writer Saul Bellow recreated the impression by using a monotonous and punctuated rhythm for his description of Russia as the most boring society in history. Dowdiness, shabbiness, dullness, dull good, boring buildings, boring discomfort, boring supervision, a dull press, dull education, boring bureaucracy, forced labor, perpetual police presence, penal presence, boring party congresses, etc. What was permanent was the defeat of interest, end of quote. The combination of boredom and fear could not remain without consequences. During this period of stagnation, it was admitted that monotony was the cause of one of the greatest problems of the society, heavy drinking. Some people plead, I quote from a magazine, some people plead that such are the times. Others drink in order to relieve the monotony of life, which turns a human being into some kind of a mechanism, end of quote. The Soviet Union of the 1980s could be described, following the philosopher Lucien Gerfagnon, as a world governed by the experience of anonymous time, when the environment was presented as if it were a given a priori, and the subject could not change it, when everything seemed to be pre-planned and could only be repeated, even experiences, when subjective time had lost value, everything seemed to be banal, and boredom was the dominant state of mind. The constant decline of economic and social conditions did not allow for optimism for the future. Time seemed to be frozen into an inalterable present where human life passed meaninglessly. Thus, a Soviet citizen could justifiably blame the society and the state for his or her boredom. And now I'll discuss 3 works to show how boredom was thematized in photography. So it's Sadness by Alfonsas Budvytis. It is part of his psychoneurological hospital series, where he had been imprisoned himself for drinking too much alcohol. A man is sitting by the window, it seems for all eternity, as if in front of a television set, which shows the same image every day. Another detail also points to the monotonous character of the view through the window, additionally highlighting the fact that the character is stuck here. the names of 3 cities carved on the wall by inmates, Tashkent, Warsaw, Tauragė. 3 different languages and different countries chat, virtually in one's mind, the world beyond this photograph. A flash of light reveals the texture of the wall on which the words are written, its solid and cold stoniness, and its unevenly, carelessly coated paint. This light emphasizes both the science of freedom and the permanence of imprisonment. Šeškus suggests a point of view through the darkness of overdevelopment, which not only distances reality, making it seem ephemeral, but also creates a heavy, oppressive surface which creates the sheen of dirt and indifference. Šeškus's boredom is dark, related to existential emptiness. The human figure is blatantly mundane and repetitive. The man is always carrying a shopping net with a cabbage. This detail causes derision because the cabbage in that net is of a similar shape to the head of the man. Thus, this visual figure acquires the power for verbal comparison. In Lithuanian, cabbage head means stupid. In the third photograph, Vilnius Balčytis captures the dismal building of the railway depot with broken windows and a large inscription, "Счастье," happiness in Russian, which is dissolving in a flash of light. There is a clear contradiction between the gloomy, inanimate reality and the ideology claiming the opposite. Even the meaning of the flash is twofold. It ironically signifies the sun of the communist future in this abandoned space where happiness exists only as an empty word, which has nothing to do with real experience. This photograph speaks of meaninglessness and absurdity inherent in the Soviet environment, its monotonous stagnation. Another characteristic of the aesthetics of boredom is that it focuses on banality. A banality is an old, well-known truth, deprived of traces of doubt or a different understanding. Through the routine of daily life, where the world seems trite, everything is familiar and self-understandable, and nothing new happens anymore, nothing is surprising. This, oh dear, this, however, is the exact reason banality multiplies and boredom grows with it. Thus, banality is both the reason and the outcome of boredom, the axis of the circle of mundane existence, which can only be escaped by doubting the banality of things itself. Somewhat paradoxically, this doubt may be nourished by portraying the most banal objects as if indifferently, objectively, with no clear purpose. A banal object is self-evident and at the same time lacks clear meaning. It just is, and therefore seems like a mute symbol. Simple, recorded mundane items evoke the absurdity of Soviet existence, yet at the same time they encourage one to hear reality speak, to doubt its banality. This is what Gintaras Zinkevičius said about his photograph of an ordinary ticket. Not only humor, but also quite cruel aggression radiates from the strongly enlarged trolleybus ticket. Is our everyday life really so simple, something which we don't notice so often? The mute, banal object is obstinately present, making the spectator go round and look beyond the image. Balčytis discovers an ironic touch to aesthetic experience in the boring environment. He photographs an inescapable element of Soviet everyday life, shop scales. He does not try to make it look different, does not show it from strange angles. On the contrary, his photograph just monotonously repeats everyday reality, creates an illusion of a thing about which everything is known, thus it is barely noticed. The object seen superficially is automatically attributed to the banality of uniform life, which is not worthy of looking and even less so of photographing. Yet Balčytis, in fact, photographs not only the scales, not only the usual unsightly, dreary environment of a canteen, but also the flash of light on the wall. The flash is ephemeral and at the same time natural to that environment. It is not some kind of photographic effect. Having stumbled on the scales and become immediately bored with them, the spectator's gaze, indifferently wandering around, discovers the flash, and it creates a rupture in the continuity of visible space. The emanation of light emerging in the dim premise unravels normality by creating wonder. So now, since there is no time left, I will go quicker through the photographs. Another aspect of all this aesthetics of boredom is the use of space. and usually some transitional spaces, some peripheral spaces, something blocks the view, and electricity poles and lamp posts become like central objects. Well, you see the same Balčytis always looks for flashes of light everywhere. And also another part of it is focusing on the closest environment, the room where one lives, and there is anything barely here. There is one woman among them, Violeta Bubelytė, and she uses this space for creative performance, and she's creating nudes until now. So she's chatting the time of her body. And here, another rainy evening, it was written a lot about by Russian art historians, telling that, okay, these papers unrolled, they're waiting for something to be written on. Yes, and chance, what? And like accidental moments, accidental juxtapositions of images are like contradiction to this classical traditional photography, the tradition of the decisive moments, which creates a composition in everyday life. And so these photographers look for these chance encounters which seem to be just slipping away, meaning nothing. Vitas Luckus here kind of juxtaposes both aesthetics. On the top, in the poster, this propaganda poster is this something similar to the school of Lithuanian photography, and on the bottom we can see chance, something banal and actually really nothing happening, this descended composition. And of course part of it is the slowing of time. And time is a very important aspect of boredom itself, because when we are bored, it runs slowly, but when we are waiting for something, our lifetime just slips away. And I noticed these photographers really explored this slippage of time, how they try to express it in this non-temporal form of photographs, and sometimes doing kind of performances like Budvytis here or here, and which also were about nothing. And actually performance art was also later done by these photographers. So yeah, I want to finish with this image, actually this photographer Gintaras Zinkevičius. When the system started changing, he started photographing things which are going to change. And this is one of the series, which is followed by an interview in Russian, and he said it shouldn't be translated into any languages, but somehow I do it. He just records a table, something brought by the Russians to Lithuania. It's part of Russian culture to have a table in a courtyard surrounded by blocks of flats where people come around, play domino and talk about life. And as the systems changed, it gradually disappeared. And so this is the photographer who later did photography of performance art, which relates to the topic of today. So yes, I will read the final paragraph. So to summarize it, so to sum it up, the aesthetics of boredom uses the dreariness of life to create positive experiences in art. It forms a rupture in that which is very close and very familiar by constantly revealing a gap between what signs of boredom apparently say and what they do not say. Such a work raises doubt in any stable meaning, whilst on the other hand, introducing a trace of meaning into apparent meaninglessness. Yet monotony should not disappear. The everyday, almost nothing should remain as such. It should not become a significant something. The aesthetics of boredom enters an aesthetic experience through monotonous situations without forgetting the very fact of where, retaining it within consciousness and suspending meaning. Thank you for attention.
Thank you so much, Agne, for your